Today, I wanted to kind of invoke the theme of the conference, the question mark behind singing. As you see on my screen here, this is kind of the proposal I put forward for the Hymn Society to talk about my research. I am a professor of English at Indiana University East. This is a regional campus of Indiana University in Richmond, Indiana. And I do interdisciplinary work, music, literature, and specifically hymnody. And my book is on, my latest book is on British hymn books for children, 1800 to 1900. And so a lot of my knowledge and things I'll talk about today is coming from there, and especially that focus on children. So the topic, the title, Victorian children, seen but not heard singing, question mark. Singing welcome may imply limited participation based on gender, race, or class status, but it most certainly could reference suppression based on age and of children in particular. When are children welcome to sing? When is their singing uncalled for or interruptive? If you have children or grandchildren, you know there are times in church or other parts of the day when you kind of wish they would be quiet. Certainly the Victorians felt there was a time and place when children should be seen and not heard, maxim that we get from that era. Through my scholarship on children's hymns in this book and my academic website, I reveal another facet, ways in which Victorians valued the hymns and songs of children. Not surprisingly, much of this was didactic, to inscribe educational and Christian values to children's singing. But singing also allowed children to be heard in powerful ways, one of which was in the political realm of temperance and animal welfare. These are bands of hope and bands of mercy hymns and songs, which I'll talk about in a minute, which invested in children's voices a God-given aptitude to spread corrective messages to the adult community. So as I say here, I would like to lead a hands-on sectional where participants view and sing some of the songs on my academic website, Sounding Childhood. And this will be placed in the chat as well, but this is the website to it. So if you'd like to get on at any time during the sectional, please do. It's soundingchildhood, one word, .org. To explore the above phenomena in 3 ways as structured in my website. And I may have put, I think maybe .com in the chat, but if that could be corrected as a .org. And just to kind of preview as I move to that website, so I'm professor of English at Indiana University East, but I have a colleague, Jessica Raposo, who's the music director, who has worked extensively with me in offering children's camps to children here in the Richmond, Indiana broader area, 3 times so far. These are biannual. They started in 2015 when we taught them about 18 to 20 hymns that we recorded for this website. And then we reconvened with a slightly different group, children age out, as those of you who work with children's choirs know. So in 2017, I taught them a number of Victorian secular songs for school and play. And then we reconvened one more time in 2019 for political songs, under which is the banner, the banner title for Bands of Mercy songs in particular, which is what we recorded that year. And I'll be saying a lot more about what those are in a minute. And we do hope actually to pull together a choir, not this summer, but in the fall, to actually record some Christmas carols. I was very honored to have an article published in the Hymn on children's Christmas carols of the Victorian era. I think that article came out in the 2017 winter issue, but any rate, that is a sub interest of mine that we will be, so I'll be sharing a lot of children's carols with the group and recording those. So do look for continued genres to be added to this template. But I did want to mention that in fact, this is part of a larger academic website called Sounding Victorian. And the whole goal of of the Victorian professors who are represented here is to bring a real liveness to Victorian music, to record music and songs that were important to the Victorians, but also in spaces where they might have been found. So sounding the salon, my colleague Phyllis Welliver is going around to actual salons, Victorian era, and recording there, et cetera, et cetera. I do have to admit that the recordings I have done so far has been in my home church, Central United Methodist Church of Richmond, Indiana, and it was actually built in the 1950s. So I am a few years off from it being Victorian, though I have a lead on a Victorian church in town where we might move for further recordings. But anyway, you can, if you end up here, you can find my website here as well just by clicking it. So I'll just go ahead and share with you Sounding Childhood, my academic website. And what I state here is this idea that Victorian children were just as musical as adults during the Romantic era in the 19th century, but little has been done to explore this phenomenon. And neither was there, of course, an ability to record children's music or even an interest once recording became an option. So we really have a very limited actual sounds of children in the Victorian era. So my colleague and I have tried to fill that void. Obviously, these are not Victorian children, but they are children of today with an interest in the Victorian era. And with these camps, we try to teach them a lot about the culture as they're learning the songs. And these three genres that I have picked up so far are representing kind of the diversity of the songs children would have sung, whether it be in, as I say here, some used for play taught by adults, adapted by children, like nursery rhymes. Also, much of it taught in church and in school, the hymns and school songs, and some even written and used politically. So the bands of hope, which I will not talk about, I have not recorded those yet, would have been used by the temperance movement of the 19th century to kind of inculcate children into that movement and to share the fervent wish and commitment to stay free of alcohol. And they figured if they taught it to children, they would themselves avoid alcohol as they got older, and of course take it home and promote that message at home as well. So Bands of Mercy, though that came out in the 1870s, Bands of Mercy actually came out in the 1890s along the same template, but being used by the animal rights movement to inculcate that the value of animals and respecting animals and animal life through these Bands of Mercy songs. And so I'll say more about that in a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just take you through the three different sections that I have here. Stephen is moderating the chat, so if you want to put into the chat a song that you see or maybe have found on your own if you have pulled up the website, and I'm glad to sing or at least look at any song that you see here that you would like to sing. And I should also mention before I get too much further that as part of the camp, we dress the kids up. And this is probably their favorite part of it, is dressing up. By the time that 2017 came along, I was not ransacking my own closets with old clothes, which were obviously not Victorian, but we actually were using some Victorian styled clothing from the local theater in our last two camps. But anyway, the kids loved and realized that there was a real seriousness to Victorian photography because of the slowness of taking it. You kind of had to hold a straight face. And so this top one, which I did in sepia to also emulate Victorian photography, they greatly enjoyed kind of taking very serious images. So you'll see some of those scattered around, but I didn't want you to think that they were necessarily sad about the camp, but they were just trying to play along with the era. So, okay, here we go, hymns and religious songs. So 19th century children's hymns. and forgive me for just reading a bit of what I have overviewed here. In today's society, hymns, when they are still sung at all, are primarily sung in church or church-related activities, camps, etc. And they are usually sung as the entire congregation of all ages. Popular music dominates what children sing on their own, even what might be sung in schools and at home. In the 19th century, in both England and America, folk songs and popular music existed, but what children of all classes would sing on a daily basis were hymns. They sang them at home, they sang them at church, they sang them at church-sponsored schools, they sang them at public boarding schools, later they sang them in the national schools. And that's really what I explore in great depth in my book here. So my study stems both from my personal love of hymn singing. I grew up in a Methodist church, of which my father was associate pastor in a Methodist church up in Michigan. And the as well as youth, and now as an adult, I still love hymns. And from my two areas of scholarship, Victorian aesthetics and children's literature, as I kind of merged them into my study of Victorian children's hymnody. It focused primarily on the situation in England and spans the entire 19th century. It is based on 3 research trips to England, 2006 to 14, as I delved into archives and libraries for extant hymn books. And I should mention that I am using the term hymn books, not hymnals, as you might use today, because that seemed to be the preferred term of these books. And I'll just show you one of them that I was able to buy at, get this, a used hymn book sale that the English, the Hymn Society of England and Ireland had, Great Britain and Ireland, excuse me, held while I was there. I was able to attend it one time. And so anyway, getting to the front cover here, you will see that that is the term that is being used. A hymn book has 2 words. So I just wanted to respect that. Hymnal is really not a term I used a whole lot. And anyway, so these are for children of the era, which was an incredibly rich and unique genre of book publishing for children, rarely seen in such quantities before or since. And in my study, as I've gone along, I've amassed a bibliography of over 100 hymn books. And like I said, I'm grateful to own a few of them. This is actually a pocket version of Hymns Ancient and Modern that I got at that used hymn book sale in a original edition. I'm so grateful to have this. And many of the children's hymn books were this small as well. They're called pocket wear. They could slip them into a pocket to take to school, or for an adult to take to church, riding on their horse, et cetera, et cetera. This is a hymn book of the later era. And by then they were getting in the scores, which would be more expensive to print. These early books were just the text, and they had oftentimes they would denote a hymn tune that they could be sung to, but the singer would have to call up what that hymn tune was. So it was a printing phenomenon of the late century that they were able to get the full scores in here, and special scrolls and imagery on the covers. So anyway, you can read a bit more about the book and some of the various subtopics that I take with the whole topic of children's hymnody. But I do want to kind of end with right here, which are 3 precepts that I make about this. And I think it relates back to that whole idea of children singing welcome, question mark. I believe, and I've discovered, I feel quite conclusively that hymns challenge and empower children, placing deep theology and rich poetry within the grasp of children. And I believe Victorians knew that, and I believe we know that today, many of us who work with children's choirs. The music is just as powerful and perhaps even more inspirational at times as the text, making hymns for adults with engaging tunes very popular in children's hymn books. Victorians offered hymns to children as a way that those children could impact the world around them in missionary work, temperance work, and even animal welfare, as I've already discussed. So, the power of hymns and religious related songs went far during the Victorian period to empower children. And I think we still have that power available for children of today. So you will see now on this list what I did with those 100 hymn books. I took the indices of as many of them that had indices or that I could photocopy. Um, Sometimes they'd be at the front, but anyway, they would list out all the hymns in a book, even if I, was unable to photocopy the entire book. I had the index. And so I created a huge Excel database of about 16,000 hymns ultimately. And I crunched them to find out which were the most popularly appearing hymns in these hymn books. So the list you see before you are the top 30, of the hymns that I have that I discovered in my research. The number one, the most popular, and sadly, I don't believe we sing it anymore. At least I was not familiar with this until I began the research. Was I think when I read that sweet story of old. If anybody would like to listen to that, we can do that. What I will do is I'll just take you to the page, which is kind of what all my pages do. I give you a scan or sometimes a clear photocopy or photo, of the score from the original hymn book. I give you a write-up that I have, words I have to say about that particular hymn. And then I have a recording that you can just hit and it will play it. Let me just go ahead and do it. I'm right here. You can listen to the tune and see if it's something familiar to you. It's a beautiful tune. It's a bit challenging. It's in a higher key. My own choir struggled with this song because it is expecting children's voices to reach up higher. And my sense is that children's voices were just inclined to go higher in the Victorian period. We may have lost that. We may have we're catering to children not wanting to sing too high or whatever. And keys are going down if you compare hymn books across various centuries and decades. The keys are modulated down. So when I found this tune in a 1950s hymn book, the key had gone down a couple notches just to accommodate the lower voices of children. But anyway, so you can go through this website just in order of those hymns. And once you get into it, they are alphabetical. So if you see here, I actually have two different charts going on. So let me take it back here. Okay. And maybe this would be a good point to move over. And if you hit this little icon over here on the website, this gives you some of these other options that I'm using, like the alphabetical index. If you just want to look at all of the scores that I have compiled, they're all there. I have a few recordings if you just want to see some of the, I'm sorry, those are the recordings. I have some rehearsal videos, there they are. If you just want to see some of the fun times we had recording some of this music. There is a timeline. So if you want to see all of the hymns from the earliest to the latest, this is pretty useful. Okay, and then see. Yeah, I guess that was it. Some of the fun things you can find there. But I'm going to go back to what was on that original website. This is how I have it placed on the hymns page by popularity. And I thought it would be neat to go here to Near My God to Thee. This is what many of you may know apocryphally to have been the hymn that was played by the Hartley, William Hartley, I think was his name, band aboard the Titanic in 1912. As it was going down, the band stayed and they played a hymn. And I still like to think it was Near My God to Thee. But the problem with that is that British and American singers have two different tunes that they sing to this hymn. And I, as an American, grew up with the Hastings version. And this, which I want to play for you in a minute, which I actually prefer, this is the beautiful tune that was used in Hymns Ancient and Modern. And it was written by J.B. Dykes. Horbury is the name of the tune. Dykes is the Holy, Holy, Holy. He wrote many wonderful tunes for hymns, ancient and modern, that kind of fell into popularity with our hymns. But interestingly enough, this text actually was set to a different tune in America. And so anyway, the British and American passengers aboard the Titanic would have not all recognized the same tune, and apocryphally they seem to have all recognized this tune that was being played by the band. So that's just an interesting comment about how the tunes did change with these hymns, especially across the ocean. But let me go ahead, if I may, and share now with you the tune that was used by the British. And if you do know it, please sing along at home. Okay, it's a very haunting tune, and my choir ended up preferring it, or really liking the tune. Those of the children who knew both, like my daughter, actually preferred this one, and we will still sing this ourselves when this tune or this hymn comes up. But yeah, I welcome anybody in the chat to comment on whether you have heard this tune before. It is a beautiful one. So, okay, going back to the alphabetical index of hymn titles, I'll just kind of let you go through them. Actually, no, let me, I'm sorry, to skip around here a little bit. I'd actually like to focus again on the popularity aspect. So here's that list. And you will see a lot of standard fare here. These were not necessarily hymns written for children, with the exception of, I think, when I read that sweet story of old, which was about Jesus bringing the children to him. But these others, Rock of Ages, Holy, 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 Abide with Me, I mean, these were not written for children. And this is a phenomenon I do explore in my book. But briefly, I will say that I think it was the tunes, these beautiful tunes. I mean, who does not love singing Holy, 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 whether you know exactly what those complex words are saying or not. So I think adults put them in children's hymn books because they loved them. They wanted children to love them, and they were not scared about kind of that heavy text or theology that was in those hymns. They wanted to encourage children to explore the words and explore what was being taught, certainly, and just enjoy the music as they sang along. And I have a lot of apocryphal stories of children who really, and things that they would have mentioned in their diaries, actually, as I have scoured them, children who really enjoyed hymns, and very, very often it would be the tune that kind of carried it. So anyway, you'll see all of those there. There are a few that are about children. There's A Friend for Little Children, Gentle Jesus, Meek and Mild. This is a Charles Wesley. This is written for children, but not all of them. So Jesus Bids Us Shine. And then some of these, as we get down here, I just threw in to kind of represent these other genres. And I do have one band of hope here, again, coming from the temperance tradition. And this is There Is a Happy Land is the tune. And let me just play this for you a second. This was a very, very popular tune, but they modified it to put in some temperance words to them. Okay, so a lot, and I put the actual, this is the original song to the right, but I have the adapted words there. Temperance, truth shall shine, come to this happy land from sin and sorrow free, come join our temperance band, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bit there, but I do intend to record a whole camp of temperance songs at some point. Here in Richmond, Indiana, where I live, we had a lot of temperance societies here, so I've got to do it. Okay, so let me move now to part two. And this will be less about hymns for the Hymn Society, but I hope you'll still enjoy learning some of the ways that children might have been empowered, encouraged to sing, certainly in school. And like I said, these hymns were just sung everywhere. They would be sung at home and at school and Sunday school, et cetera, et cetera. And school songs and play songs were also oftentimes taught by adults, but they also had kind of a life of their own, where children would make them up or modify the words. But they did this with hymns as well, I might add. They would have fun changing the words and having fun with them. But anyway, my reminder here that Victorian children would have had opportunities to sing secular music in the home and at school, particularly after the Education Act of 1870, which made education public and mandatory to all English children. We had a similar act at the end of the 19th century as well here in America. When not offered through churches, schools would be free to teach more secular tunes. I am sure that children would have sung some of their favorites in their play as well, adapting the words to suit their fancy. Towards this end, I have begun research of British 19th century children's songbooks. Although I have also consulted American songbooks and early 20th century books, knowing that favorite English songs would be disseminated broadly and would have staying power. I am fortunate to be work within the Indiana University system, and their famous Lilly Library archival source is just couple hours away from me. So I get down there to the Lilly Library, and they have an amazing collection, the Ball collection of children's books. And I got a lot of these songs from those songbooks down there. And I basically was looking at three categories: fun, sentimental, and serious, though I end up not denoting them with these songs. There's just the list here, and they're alphabetical. These are not ranked by popularity. They're just songs that I decided to teach the kids with help of my friend Jessica. So this one, again, I'm glad to hear any suggestions that people would like to sing together, or you can look at them on your own. Actually, maybe I'll just do a quick one just to give you the excitement, apparently, that children would have going to school. Okay, you can hear the rest of those verses, but if only, and maybe our children are this excited to go to school. I think some are, but here's a whole song kind of dedicated to the excitement of returning to school. Okay, but the one I did want to share with you little bit more specifically is Dare to Do Right. This again, talk about an exciting tune. This camp, these children just loved learning this tune, and they would march around the sanctuary. This is the chancel of my church, and we would march around the sanctuary with flags. They just loved singing it. It's a militant song, and a lot of these were militant songs. This came out of a Bands of Hope songbook, but it's less about an actual ideology than just doing good, doing right, dare to do right, and really putting in the context of a religious epiphany or commitment. And doing it for God, doing it for Jesus. So with the score before you, and I'll move it down here just a second, I'm going to play this, a verse or maybe two of this, so you can hear it.
Dare to do right, dare to be true. You have a work that no other can do. Doing so bravely, so kindly, so well. Angels will hasten the story to tell. Dare, dare, dare to do right. Dare, dare, dare to be true. Dare, dare to be true. Dare to be true. Dare to do right, dare to be true. Others and failures can never save you. Stand by your conscience, your honor, your faith. Stand like a hero in battle till death. Dare, dare, dare to do right. Dare, dare, dare to be true. Dare, dare to be true. Dare to be true.
Okay, I'll stop there. But William Bradbury, he has filled the hymnals with many tuneful tunes for our hymns. So not surprising that he wrote this one. But I highlight the fact that, first of all, this was not necessarily written for children. You can see that in the words and reference to men, et cetera, et cetera. But it was found in children's songbooks. And I think that, again, is an indication that Victorians had high expectations for children to do something and right, and make commitments to things that were important, like their faith and like changing society. So I find that very powerful to think that Victorians were not belittling children at all, or at least some weren't. Some who compiled these books. And I'll just let you scan this list. Again, I'm open to suggestions. The flowers that bloom in the spring, tra-la, is yes, the Gilbert and Sullivan song from Mikado, but I found it in children's songbook. Isn't that interesting? And our children love singing that. It's a fun song. So Twinkle Twinkle Little Star was then emulated by Lewis Carroll in Alice in Wonderland as Twinkle Twinkle Little Bat. And then a composer came along and took those zany lyrics from the book and wrote music to them. So we have this Twinkle Twinkle Little Bat as a song, but we learned the original Twinkle Twinkle Little Star as well, the Anne and Jane Taylors. Yeah. So, okay, I think stop there, and I will move to the next and last aspect of this. And forgive me, I'm going to close the window. Some workmen working out here. It's a different world, isn't it? Zooming from our homes and all the noises that we have going on here. My huge apologies. I thought he was done. So, okay, this is the last one. I'm putting it under the broader heading, like I said, political songs, because there were others. Missionary and Bands of Hope were the other two that I discuss in my book. I'm holding up the paperback, just so you know, there is a cheaper version of this out there. The hard cover was kind of loud. Stephen, may I ask whether that sound is really loud?
No, it's not It's not excessively loud. We do hear it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, this is like the only day he was going to work here on something, and I could move to another room, but I think I just as soon cover up the noise with either my voice or the songs themselves. So, but do let me know, please, if this is a bigger issue. Okay, so
Sure.
this happened pre-pandemic, thankfully, summer of 2019. We gathered another group of children together to learn about bands of mercy. Let me take you to this page. Bands of mercy, and let me take you down to an extant original view of what these would have looked like. A band of mercy. They're holding those up, which is why our children use the their own versions of the letters to hold up. And this was actually at a concert where we performed, in addition to recording here. Putting on a children's literature conference, I was able to showcase my own choir, which was neat. But anyway, I think we forget that children could be political with their singing. Another way of empowering them and making their singing welcome, or at least important. These are the Bands of Mercy songs, and I came upon it just by happenstance, because I came upon a book that was hymns for Bands of Hope and for Bands of Mercy. And said, what in the world are these organizations? So I've just told you what Bands of Hope were. Bands of Mercy, part of the animal welfare movement of the 19th century. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was established in 1824, and laws and agitation was really taking off throughout the country of both England as well as here in America throughout the 19th century. And so the first Band of Mercy started in England in 1875, Earlham Grove, England. And then Engel and Timmins brought it to America. Interesting enough, if England had 800 bands by the end of the century, America far outpaced them with 27,000 bands. And bands were kind of like a Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop, that you would set up in your town, and usually an adult would do this, right? And they would hold meetings, maybe in a home. And what is really neat for me is that living here in Richmond, Indiana, this is an older town, originated by Quakers, and Quakers started several Bands of Mercy here in Richmond, Indiana. And I have a little Platinum item, a newspaper clip denoting one of the meetings that was going to take place. So that was really neat to realize that, so that when Jessica and I started a Band of Hope in 2019, we were really just resurrecting a Richmond Band of Hope by so doing. So here is our list of singers for this one. Again, I highlight those singers who have come back repeatedly, and I'm grateful for that. Others, due to time or just aging out, haven't. So we have a new crop, but I'm grateful for every camp and group of singers we've had. And this is the list of songs that I have. And most of them, I should identify this, are being taken from Sarah J. Eddy, compiler, Songs of Happy Life for Schools, Homes, and Bands of Mercy. And this is freely available on Internet Archives, Google Scholar, and in print through BiblioBazaar. It came out in both Rhode Island and in London simultaneously. So again, this was a very international or transatlantic movement. Just as many goings on in America as in England. So this is a list of songs, and there are a lot of songs about birds and hummingbirds, helpless lamb, the chipmunk, the bee, kind of focus in on animals that need children's protections. And this was not everything. It wasn't go save the great white whale or the elephant. It tended to be animals that were in the child's purview, the bees they saw, the birds, the trees. We have Woodman Spare That Tree. But I hope this is a thing of the past, but the children, particularly boys, had a predilection for going and finding bird nests and stealing the eggs, either having fun throwing them out. Maybe sometimes they would need them for food, but there was a rule, that was a real thing that children did, was rob bird nests. So there was a lot of focus on that. And of course, birds were also put in cages. We still do that somewhat, but it was a real common pet keeping phenomenon of the 19th century. And so that was another kind of reminder that children were putting out there to release your birds, the birds are crying for liberty. So let me maybe just quickly play you this.
Oh, liberty, sweet liberty, I pine and faint for thee. Fain would I burst my prison bars and soar among the free. Oh, liberty, sweet liberty, when wilt thou come to set me free?
And one point that I make here, as well as in my book, is remember the timing of this. This would have been post-Civil War for us Americans, and that recognition of liberty, which had been a call to free slaves in our own country, was now kind of being co-opted to use now in service of animals and enslavement. And a lot of those terms were kind of used for animals as well. It's very interesting to see that phenomenon. Okay, so that is just one of a number of bird songs. And Bird Day actually came about, it's on one of my sites here. I think it might have been established as kind of a national holiday in America in 1890 or something like that. So they were writing these songs to be sung in schools. Schools would have bands of mercy, or teachers would just choose to sing these as a part of the curriculum, particularly once Bird Day was enacted and kind of encouraged. They focus on birds. And why not? 19th century saw a lot of bird decimation. Our own carrier pigeon was I think it's okay. Yes, yes, I think it's carrier pigeon. No, it's not. But anyway, you'll know what pigeon this was that disappeared in 1912. These birds just covered the skies of America, and they were exterminated to death. And other types of birds, the dodo. I mean, there are a number of birds, and the Victorians saw this happening, and so it was important, to save the birds, and just there was also kind of that feeling of just showing kindness to one's fellow creatures, as an expansion of kind of the welfare that had been extended to humans, now extended to animals. And some might argue, perhaps leaving behind human concerns for the animals, and that wasn't that was sometimes criticized. For instance, the Royal Society for the Protection against cruelty to children was not established until the 1880s, much later than the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So isn't that interesting that the actual protection of children came so late? Though I argue in my book that I do believe, it came right around the corner of these bands of mercy, and perhaps just this awareness of singing for fellow creatures actually may have come back to help for the protection of children themselves. Okay, so the last one, and I will leave you with this, unless there are other comments or things I could or should be doing. Liberty, love, and peace. And I just want, sorry?
I'll cut in to say we do have one question that has
Oh,
come in.
great, please.
Yes. So, are there any hymns that you avoid singing with children today? For example, from Greenland's icy mountains.
Very, very good question. We taught it to them, but we talked about it. We talked about how racist it was, and kind of the culture of the missionary world back then. Even lovely C.F. Alexander, All Things Bright and Beautiful. It has a verse in there, and maybe I will actually. No, I don't think I have it up here. I'm sorry. I just realized I'm not sure I do. But it has a verse about God has placed every person in their proper estate, and kind of enforcing the status quo and class hierarchy. And it's taken out of every hymn book today, fortunately, but it was used back then. And so now I look at it, I don't think we did end up recording that, but I would record it, and I would record it with the original words, and we would just talk about it. That's kind of my approach to teaching children's literature, which I do at the university, by the way. In general, I would never censor anything, but I would talk about it, and I would explain this is bound by its historical limitations, the ideology of the time, we've moved past it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and there may be some other I mean, there's just some heavy theology on here that might preclude children singing. I mean, this Rock of Ages, this is pretty heavy stuff. The water and the blood from thy wounded side which flowed. Although we still sing that in hymn books, but there are some things that and that's why it's great to kind of do this as a camp, as opposed to just come in and let's sing these songs. There's time to talk about what we are singing, and we do a lot of that, and I do a lot of kind of explaining, and I might explain even what these phrases and theologies mean, whether children choose to buy into them or not. Yeah, that was a great question. May I ask whether that answered your question?
We can keep an eye if the chat comes
Yeah,
through, but
yeah,
we can't hear from them, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, but please keep populating that chat. I'm glad to take any more questions, and I'm not rushing anybody. But while I play this song, maybe be thinking of things that I didn't cover unintentionally. I would like to cover any questions that you have, and thank you for that one. Okay, so liberty, love, and peace. This is I chose to focus on it just as a reminder that the Band of Mercy, these were it was founded by Catherine Smithies, who was an evangelical, very committed to her faith, and many of the Bands of Mercy were coming out of the Christian tradition, in England and America. I mean, they were yoked with the church, and as well as the Temperance Society. I guess that probably goes without saying, but even the Bands of Mercy bands would be done or connected with Sunday schools, et cetera, et cetera. So perhaps no surprise, but to kind of bring in kind of one of their statements was, God made these creatures, as seen here in this older painting. We need to protect those creatures. And this is not a bad message to continue to put out to children. I was very excited to start a Band of Mercy here in Richmond. I just think there are so many more things that are animal companions and species need protection from in the 21st century, as so many of them are facing mass extinction and climate change, confined animal feeding operations. There's just humans have done some cruel things to animals individually and species wise. So I think it is really neat that there were Bands of Mercies, and sad that there aren't Bands of Mercy anymore. As far as I can tell, they seem to have disappeared around World War I. World War I being so disillusioning to so many ideologies, people's beliefs. I think it kind of it was hard to keep those things going. As the whole world had faced this, it was harder to get people focused back on animals, I suppose. So that seemed to be when the band started disappearing. But high time we brought them back. And I would be glad to talk to any people about starting a band in your town, even if it's brief, like mine was. Mine was a week and a half camp. But anyway, okay, so here's this song, 2 pages. I won't cut off after the song. I'll certainly be glad to answer more questions, but you can be thinking of questions as you listen to this. Liberty, love, and peace.
Angel of mercy, marshal forth thy
So again, kind of reminder that these are God's creatures, yoking it with a religious tradition, and as another reason to protect them and go out and save. Are there any songs while I'm here in Bands of Mercy that people would like to hear, sing? Obviously, you can go back and do this at your leisure, and I hope you do. Remember, it's a simple website, www.soundingchildhood.org, so you can pull it up on your own, but I would be glad to look at or discuss each one of these. I try to have a little commentary for each one of these, and sometimes an image. And most of the images are from our camp and the fun that we had dressing up here and kind of throughout our church building that one summer. So here's some.
I see we've got a request for Hail to the Elm.
Yes. Let's sing about trees. This is wonderful. I feel it should be Hail to the Ash because we are now losing ash trees. But elm was had their own disease, right? So, and I mentioned that. I'm trying to remember the years though. Yeah, there it is, 1940s and 50s. And this, I hadn't realized it affected English elm as well, but millions of elms lost in North America. Now, this is not why this song was written. It predated that, but it, a reason to sing for the trees. So thank you for your interest in that. Let me play it and hear the words.
Hail to the elm, the brave old elm, our last known forest tree, whose limbs outstand the lightning's breath. For a brave old elm is he. For 50 score of folks old years, he has borne his leafy pride. Yet he holds farewell and lives to tell his tale of the olden time. Then hail to the elm, to the green top down, and long may his branches wave. For a relic is he, the gnarled old tree of the time of the good and brave.
Sorry, I just did something wrong. Sorry. I just realized I don't have the second page of the song. I'm glad you asked to hear it because I had not realized I need to get the second page up. But there we are standing in front of not an elm. I can't remember what tree this was, maybe a locust. But anyway, yes, thank you for that request. Are there other songs, even from some of the other categories that you saw me flashing past that we could linger over? I might mention that song was sung in unison, but we have been trying with a lot of these songs to get parts out of the children. We were especially successful when we did our hymn camp and when we had some guys who were willing to tackle the alto line. They did a great job with those, and kids can do this stuff. You just have to help them a bit. But I'm convinced that Victorian children were tackling 2- and 3-part harmony quite well as well.
Yeah, your comment actually addresses another question that came up. Were the children's hymns generally sung in unison rather than learning parts? So
yes, thank you. And I don't know for a fact, except that the scores are written in parts, chordal, and I can only assume that is to encourage harmonies. There was a big movement to get congregational singing in churches, from the early 19th century onward, and they were actually relying on children to do that. Sometimes they would teach children in Sunday school the harmonies, the parts, and then kind of scatter them throughout the congregation to help with congregational singing so that it would be sung in parts as well. So yes, I think with the exception of bass, where they probably didn't have children's low voices for that, I like to think, and I do know in many cases there was a push to teach the children's singing in parts, in harmonies, part harmonies. Yeah.
And one other question we've
Huh?
got is, I see mostly girls in the pictures. Did and
Yes.
do boys sing as well?
They do. It's just been harder to get boys. We've never said no boys allowed. We say boys and girls welcome. But you see, with the exception of that first camp, we have only been successful in getting girls. Try as hard as we have. Even sometimes I would try to get brothers to come with the sisters, and I guess it's just too girly a thing to do right now. I regret to say that, but no, during the Victorian eras, obviously, Sunday schools had both boys and girls, and both genders were singing these songs. And that's in fact a point I make that is kind of neat about the leveling of these hymns. All classes, all genders, everybody was kind of singing the same core hymns. But nowadays, it has been harder for me. It may also be because I have a girl only, so she brought in her friends. If I'd had a son, I might have been able to co-opt his friends, but I don't. So it might be partially where I am in my situation. Thank you for that question. Okay. Other questions? Do you see anything else in the chat, Stephen?
No, it looks like that's all that's come through.
Okay. I greatly appreciate everybody's time. And I hope whether you are viewing it now on June 29th or whether you're viewing it later, you enjoy singing and kind of taking us back to when we were young, and perhaps the fun we had of singing hymns and songs, and might recognize some tunes and some songs themselves. I would love to keep in touch with anybody who had questions or thoughts on my work, and you can find me here. I think I also, there I am. Okay, but there's my email right there, aclappit@indiana.edu. So would love any kind of feedback, thoughts on any of this. And as you are able to share this website with others, I would appreciate it. My hope was that it would be used, and it would add to what we are discovering in our research, but also just as we are sharing our love of hymns, and being reminded that has been a long tradition of sharing hymns with children. So yes, singing is welcome, and it is welcome among children, even if they sing at the wrong time or too loud, or times and places we wish they were not singing. So without further ado, I guess I will say goodbye unless anybody wants to stop me or has any final parting thoughts. I look to you, Stephen.
Yeah, we're getting comments of deep thanks for your
Oh,
presentation.
thank you. Thank
So
you, everybody.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your day with me. And I look forward to enjoying the conference together in a few weeks in July, and look forward to being back in person at some point too.